He was very adjusted, social, athletic. I mean, he was the last kid on earth, I would think, would display any problems, but I guess he kept it all inside.
Denise Roberts lost her 19-year-old son Dillan to overdose in 2010, just 2 years after losing her 41-year-old husband Tom to a heart attack. Dillan helped her understand addiction.
I mean, he was a kid that wanted to be healthy. He wanted to get well. He made it clear to me, and that's when the light bulbs kind of went off. And he said, "Mom, I'm not a bad kid. I'm a sick kid."
Now, after the deaths of her husband and youngest son, Denise couldn't imagine she would have to face even more loss. However, in a cruel twist of fate, her oldest son, Matthew, also overdosed and died 6 years later.
People say, "I don't know how you do it." They give you this look, and I feel like I should just be, a puddle of water of nothing, at this point. And I just said, what is the alternative?
In this episode of Grieving Out Loud, Denise shares how she keeps going and growing despite the deaths of her husband and both sons. Well, Denise, thank you so much for joining me today. And the first thing I want to say is I don't even know how to put into words how sorry I am for the losses you have experienced. It's unbelievable to me that someone could lose 3 members of their family, immediate members of their family, and 2 children. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate that.
Let's start off a little bit by talking about your kids and your family. So you had Dillan and Matthew, and you got remarried. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, I had Dillan and Matthew, and I got remarried to Tom. He was just fabulous, and we were the Brady Bunch, or so we thought. I had Matthew and Dillan, and he had 2 children as well. And they were all very, very close in age. And when we met, they were 2, 3, 4, and 7. So very young. And,
wow. And how old were Dillan and Matthew? Were they the older ones or the younger ones?
No, they were kind of in the middle. Matthew would have been the oldest at 7, and Dillan was 3.
Still very young, and the blending. Sometimes blended families don't work so well, but the blending went pretty well for you guys.
Oh, I wouldn't say that, but we definitely got the hang of it. It was a long time. We dated and blended and learned and grew and built a big house and coached our kids. I mean, it was great.
Unexpectedly, you lost Tom at a very young age, your husband. Tell me what happened.
Yes. Tom was the epitome of health. We also had a health business. He worked out, we had supplements, lived a very clean, healthy lifestyle. He was originally from California, but we were landlocked in Las Vegas, so he would surf a lot, and that was his passion. He was on one of his biannual trips with some buddies and went to Nicaragua. I mean, he was a big surfer, so he was surfing at Nicaragua, Costa Rica, El Salvador. He took the boys one time as well. It was just on this surf trip. He was there 3 days or so, and his friend said he was on top of the world that morning, surfing the best waves, and had gone back and ate lunch and took a nap and didn't wake up. They heard some kind of loud snoring, and they tried to wake him up and ask him if he was okay, and he mouthed the words, "I'm fine." And that was it. Tom was 41 years old.
Gosh.
No evidence, no prior heart issues, no medications, nothing.
You always think, you're protected from that kind of thing if you take good care of yourself. I think it's kind of the way we feel about overdoses in this country too. If you're a good parent, if you do everything right, if your kids have good opportunities, they're going to be protected. It's the same. I'm drawing a parallel here, but I mean, you would have no reason to think anything like this would happen to Tom.
Right. In fact, hindsight, as you say, I look back and think, had he been 50, 60 pounds overweight, they would have, sent him for a stress test or EKG or EEG or something. But he went in with frequent bronchitis. And I later learned that you shouldn't have bronchitis several times a year. And it was more of a heart issue than a breathing issue. He just never, every time he would get bronchitis, he didn't want to go to the doctor, get an inhaler, take antibiotics. That's all they would do. So I kind of wondered. And so after he passed, that was a nightmare because he was in another country. The autopsy showed he had probably prior heart attacks and didn't know it. He had scarring on the heart. Wow. And again, looking back, he would work out and his shoulder or left arm was a little sore, left arm, right? But at the time he thought, I pushed myself too much in my work. Being 41, very trim, no nothing, right? But had he presented a little differently, he would have gotten the medical care probably.
It's so unfortunate. And so his death obviously affected your entire family, including your boys.
Right. And it did, more than I even realized, probably more than they did down the road. In particular, Dillan, because just before Tom went on this trip, we took Dillan into another rehab. And Dillan was combative and he said some not so nice things to Tom. And that was the last time he spoke to Tom. So after he passed, he had that guilt and he just had a very hard time with it.
So you had already been dealing with addiction issues with Dillan, who was just 19 when he died of overdose. Tell me when that started and what happened.
Died when he was 19. It wasn't, and I didn't learn of it until about 17. It was actually at Tom's funeral is when I realized it was really bad. So, it was right about that same time, we were putting him in a detox or rehab just before Tom went on that trip and passed. But then at the funeral, we couldn't keep Dillan out of the bathroom, which again, he just couldn't stay in one room. And so 2 weeks after burying Tom, I was then driving Dillan to Salt Lake City, Utah for a 9-month inpatient treatment center.
You got him help.
Yeah.
That's what we're supposed to do, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And he would have been 17 at the time. 17.
Right. Right.
And how did that go? How did that first treatment work for him?
I thought it went great. And he was an excellent student, as are most, or, several that I know of. They're in rehab, they rebel a little bit, but eventually, they do well. What I know now is it's much too short. It all depends on your insurance or the funding as to, how quickly you get out.
We know now that it takes about 13 to 24 months for the brain to recover, right? Right. After use, substance use disorder, but most people get 28 days.
Yeah.
If they're lucky.
Right.
So he did get 9 months in that. But you're saying after he got out, it was the follow-up. Right.
There was minimal, go to meetings, do this or that, I guess on your own. And he was successful for a little bit, but the core of the problem was never addressed, which is mental health issues.
What mental health issues do you think Dillan suffered from?
Definitely dealing with the death of Tom. He had an awful lot of remorse and grief of his own and didn't process that. He also, I later learned, had a lot of bullying issues at school, totally unaware of. And I think also our divorce was an issue. He was very adjusted, social, athletic. I mean, he was the last kid on earth, I would think, would display any problems, but I guess he kept it all inside. And on the appearance outwards, he looked like he was fine and he would verbalize that. But
sounds so much like Emily. I mean, she was smart and athletic and good in school and beautiful and all these things. And she was also most affected by the divorce that I went through with her dad. So, I think it affects every kid differently. And I always say, you can't say, half of all marriages end in divorce. So if that always caused,
right.
kids to turn to substances, but could be a part of it for sure.
Sure. Right. And, we never had any serious family counseling or that kind of thing with regard to the divorce. It was,
and I took Emily to counseling for, during the divorce and afterwards. And I don't know. I mean, it's such a hard puzzle to fit together, isn't it?
Right. And I think it ties into a whole stigma of, people not talking about mental health issues, right? If you're depressed or suffering from depression, it goes right alongside with, suicide. I just saw in the news yesterday, a college football player came out, was on a morning show talking about, his suicide attempts and how he wanted to talk about it and how alone he felt. And I thought, wow, yes, you don't hear of that.
And I think definitely for sure, we're starting to talk about these things more, and suicide, especially. I still think the stigma is so strong around substance use disorder and overdose, or, now it's poisoning. I mean, it's just fentanyl. It's a drug supply is contaminated. I always say, if people were putting fentanyl into alcohol in a bar and people were dropping over dead, what kind of reaction would we have in this country rather than, it's an illegal drug, they weren't supposed to be doing that? Well, we all know that. Right. But it's that stigma, right?
Mm-hmm. 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 Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And that is where it needs to start. You're absolutely correct. The education and also the science of it, I think, not just the abstinence of don't do it, probably more of the harm reduction, or this is what it does, to really kind of spell it out for people.
You didn't get a chance to finish Dillan's story. So could you finish about what happened to Dillan?
Dillan was in 3 rehabs in about 2 years, 9 months. One was about 3 months. And then the last one, like 6 weeks. So, he was a kid that wanted to be healthy. He wanted to get well. He made it clear to me. And that's when the light bulbs kind of went off. And he said, "Mom, I'm not a bad kid. I'm a sick kid." Oh my gosh, that just like wrenched at my heart, because I'll be honest, I just kept saying, like, why can't you just not do this? Just stop. You know what it does. And I didn't get it. And so, and when he said, "I'm not a bad kid, I'm just a sick kid," it's because, he would take all kinds of things from me and pawn it, and then come give me the pawn slip and say, "Mom, I'm sorry, here you go." And again, I'm just like, oh God, it was just breaking my heart. And he knew it, that he was just trying at all costs. Well, he got out of his last rehab and he said, "Mom, whatever I'm doing isn't working." So I found a place in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm going to come home, get my stuff, and I'm going to go there. And I'm going to get connected. I'll get a job, find a church. Great. So he came home. He had his favorite meal. It was, I'll never forget, it was the day after Christmas. And then his father rode with him to Phoenix from Las Vegas. And he went into a halfway house. I got plenty of texts, talked to him first few days. He had his guitar. He'd found a church. And then on December 30th, that morning I got the phone call, starting out with, "Ma'am, where are you?" I later learned that he had stopped at a Mexican restaurant before going to the halfway house with his dad. I presume he had picked up because he was found in his bed in the halfway house, deceased.
And you think he got the drugs at the restaurant?
Yes.
And what was it that killed him?
Heroin.
And was it laced with fentanyl at the time?
They didn't even check.
Because we want to point out to people, this was 2010.
Correct. Yep. I don't think I'd even heard of it. In 2010, it wasn't, no one checked. I always thought that because he had been clean for 6 weeks, which is, again, he just gotten out of rehab. He came to my house, had dinner, drove to Phoenix. So, I'm just not sure, but he got there. It was a matter of 3 days. And he used.
And this was 2 years after Tom had died. 2 years.
Right. Yeah.
So you're still really early in the grieving process with losing your husband.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know. I would end up at work an hour, 2 hours late because I literally would lose my way. You probably understand that.
I do. I think grief is trauma to the brain. I think this sudden unexpected loss is the worst kind of trauma, because in both cases you weren't, expecting them to die. And I just feel like it's almost like brain damage. And people don't understand that. They want to give you a little time, maybe 3 days or 2 weeks, but then they want you to pick up and move on.
Right.
And I don't think that's really humanly possible, especially for sudden death, especially when it's a child, or a spouse.
Right.
Unrealistic. We have unrealistic expectations of people.
Right.
Were you able to keep your job? Because I know some moms who've lost kids that lost their jobs too.
Yeah. No, I did.
My heart just aches for you. So you're in this fog, right?
Fog. Yes.
Was it different losing your husband and losing your son? Was it different for you?
Yes. And, I can speak to both of them, and they are so very different. So yes, my husband's death was very unexpected, but I never had that feeling of, I should have saved him. I should have known there was something more I could do. Sure, but no. He gave me the greatest gift. Before he passed, he had written on a little sticky note, again, not knowing he was a great man of God. And anyway, he always wrote to-do lists, and he wrote a little to-do list. And it was number 1, seek after God. Number 2, protect your children. 3, learn to control your temper. And I kind of chuckled. And anyway, there was a couple more. And then the last one was, it's spelled love, 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 offer, value. And something else, your wife. And I just was like, oh my gosh. It was truly Tom's last to-do list, and he had done that. So I didn't find that until a couple of weeks after he passed. It was in a book that I had been reading on a plane, that we had just spent our anniversary together. So anyway, it was just a sense of almost peace, because something came over me, and I told him, the last day I saw him, which is strange, if anything ever happened to you while you're surfing, I'd be okay with that, because I know how much you love it. And this man had worked so hard, but he had taken 3 weeks off from work.
Which I bet was unusual, right?
Yep. Yeah. We were doing well. He worked as a bellman at a hotel. So, we had a little business, but 3 weeks. And he surfed a week in California with his kids. He spent a week with me in Hawaii for our anniversary. And then he was in Nicaragua for a few days with his buddies.
I think what you're talking about with a spouse is that as a mother, you feel so responsible for this human being from the moment you find out you're pregnant,
Yes.
And give birth, and you feel like you can somehow control and take care of everything and make everything okay. I think we as mothers, it's just in us, right? That's just ingrained in us. So obviously it feels different because you don't feel that way about your spouse. I mean, you may love and care for your spouse. Your spouse is another adult that you weren't responsible for from the moment of conception.
Right. But right. Your kids, my boys, and even after one, but then two, you kind of just like, what? I said, okay, God, you have my attention. Now what? And so,
all right, so we need to talk about Matthew because, I interviewed another woman on this podcast who lost 5 children to overdose out of 12. And she lives in the East Coast in an area that's very riddled with the opioid epidemic. Obviously, I mean, some areas it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Right.
Some areas a little worse than others, but I can't imagine that. But, to lose your spouse, then to lose your younger son, Dillan, and then his brother was 4 years older than him.
Right. Yeah.
And had he always struggled with addiction as well? Or was it something that came up later?
No, in fact, all while Dillan was struggling, Matthew came to me and said, Mom, he is going to die. You don't understand. He's doing this bad stuff. He's going to die. I said, Matthew, don't talk like that. No, he's not. I mean, I didn't know he was shooting at that time. But so no, Matthew didn't until shortly after Dillan passed. They were very close, even though they were 4 years apart, shared the same birthday. And I used to get calls from the caretaker at the cemetery because Matthew was out there making a scene at night and wouldn't leave. And it's just, heart-wrenching, of course.
But you really think that Matthew's use started after Dillan's death to cope with his death or to cope with all the loss, probably?
Yes, Dillan and Tom and a lot of his own issues as well, but I don't think it would have escalated like it did.
You had Matthew for 6 years after Dillan died.
Right.
And I bet you just lived for him. I bet you just thought like, this is it for me. I've just got him.
Yeah, that was tough.
Did he know that? Do you think?
I do. In fact, Matthew would, after Dillan passed, he would still give me cards and he would sign both their names.
Oh, because the reason why I say that is because I feel like a lot of what keeps me going are my other kids. I mean, there are other things too, like the mission of Emily's Hope, but really, I just feel like I need to keep going because I have these other kids who still, even though they're adults now, need their mom and also my spouse. I'm not trying to downplay him because he's wonderful and obviously very important. But I think that is for moms, like if you lose one child and you have other children, you're kind of like, okay, I still have one more or two more or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And did Matthew get help ever? What was he using?
Heroin. Probably.
How does he go? If he hadn't been using in the past, how does he go? Does he go right to heroin or do you know?
I really don't know. I think it was pills at first. And then I know he was smoking it and would never inject it, but eventually he did. The difference is that Matthew got into the system, which I know you've talked about that a little bit, and I couldn't agree more. And that is not a place for people that need real mental health, and it's not a drug issue.
Well, first of all, you're already stigmatized as a drug user.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you get a record as a drug user, therefore you could no longer rent places, get jobs. The shame surrounding drug use and addiction and substance use disorder, that there's so much shame wrapped up in that. And you add on another layer of shame because now you're a criminal. I think it really lowers people's self-esteem even more.
Matthew it was so low. It was a very minor charge. I can't even recall, but he had to serve time, and he was in a little town in Holbrook, Arizona, I remember. And he served his time, and then he got out and he was on probation. Great. We wrote letters to the judge asking him if he could transfer to Las Vegas, where his family was. And he had a fiance and a baby, 2-year-old daughter. He wrote to the judge everything. They denied his request to transfer his probation to Las Vegas. So what are you doing? You're further isolating, keeping this kid, early 20-year-old, in a small town, knows nobody, he's working at the local gas station, can't get a job doing anything else, can't see his fiance or his child. So guess what happened? He was depressed. Yeah, he dealt with depression and had issues, and he used. And then he was found by himself in his bed.
In Arizona, away from his, while he was on probation.
Absolutely. And as soon as the court heard that, they immediately removed the court record.
And so he was 28.
Right.
And that was 2016. So this is 6 years after Dillan died. Did they test at that time for fentanyl?
They did. And I had heard of it. They tested it. And that was another thing. And there was no evidence of that. Oh. And so
we know it doesn't have to have fentanyl. We know opioids kill, heroin kills by itself.
And it was such, and I looked at the levels, and it was, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's true. It was such a small amount, but it was enough to kill. Like, it wasn't a ton, but it was just evidence that it was more, he just hadn't used in forever. And that little bit did make him overdose. Because
when people do go use after a period of abstinence,
right,
if they use the same amount they were using prior, it can be deadly. Their bodies can't handle what they used to use.
Exactly.
But so you have a granddaughter?
Yes, I have a granddaughter and a grandson, and they are now 9 and 6. Both Matthews, and he had something to live for, and he wanted to. That was the thing. And he wanted to be with his family, and he did what he thought he needed to do. And there was, just one more barrier let's put up in front of him. He wasn't distributing. He didn't have, I think they had found like a pill in his backpack when he was driving through. And that's how he got stuck in Holbrook.
Oh, I just don't think the judicial system and the criminals. Now, I know we have drug courts and there are some efforts underway, but overall, if you look at the whole picture of the criminal system, the justice system, they don't know really how to handle addiction, and it's not a crime. It causes people to complete crimes sometimes, especially you have more violent offenders with the use of methamphetamine. But we just have to figure this out. We have to make some serious shifts in our country, but I don't see that coming.
No. And they, at the time of his death, they said there wasn't any fentanyl, and that was it. They closed the case. They didn't bother looking in his phone, trying to find out who gave it to him, because he's just one more kid that died in this area. Oh, well,
I'm so sorry.
So there was
so sorry, Denise.
Investigation. And I think, gosh, that's, again, the stigma continued all the way through the end result,
even after his death, really, because nobody cared enough to prosecute this little death, little case, minor, right? Didn't matter.
No.
Yeah. And I know that prosecutors, and they're limited by their resources as well. We all know that there's not enough money, for people to do things. But when it's your kid, oh, I'm so sorry. So you, at this point, so we're in 2016, and thank you so much for telling me. I know, because I tell Emily's story, so I am quite aware that every time I ask someone to tell their story, they relive it. And a lot of those same feelings, you can go about your daily business, right, and not be immersed in it. Not that you don't think about it different times during the day, but I understand I'm making you relive this to some extent, to have you hash out the whole story for me. So thank you so much for doing that. And just know that I know it's a heartache. I know it's a heartache to talk about it.
You do. And you do it day in and day out, because what are the options? We're not going to stand by and just, let it continue to happen. And if anything,
Right.
we have our voice, and, it'll help someone down the line. We may not know now, but that's okay. I'm not going to stand silent anymore.
And I'm sure that most people react with shock when they hear you've lost two kids to overdose, let alone your husband, earlier. Are you used to that reaction?
Sort of. I mean, people say, I don't know how you do it. And I really, yes, they give you this look. And like, I feel like I should just be, a puddle of water of nothing, at this point. And I just said, what is the alternative? Should I just stay in bed and never get out?
You could. You could.
I could.
You could exit. Some people choose that. I mean, I'm not saying I would never say anybody should do that, but people do make choices.
You're right. But I just said, you know what? As much as I can, I get up, dress up, and show up.
Well, you look beautiful. I appreciate that. Yeah, you have to just get out of bed and start putting one foot in front of the other.
Right. Keep moving forward. I'm just hopeful along the way that, we can help others.
Right. What do you think it is inside of you, or what do you think it is that enables you to do that, to get up, keep going about every day for the last, it's been a while now. I mean, since 2016.
My strong faith in God, and I do believe that I'll be reunited with them. People often think that, we have children to raise them and to, teach them. And in fact, I think it's really the other way. I mean, the lessons that we learn from our children, and, a lot of people say, well, this was their journey. Well, this was my journey too. And
Right.
I am very grateful, that I got to have Matthew for 19 years and Dillan for 28. I mean, I look at several people that can't have kids. So this was just part of, what I'm here to do, the lessons I'm to learn. I know it's made me a better person, not bitter. I want to turn that bitterness into helpfulness, and doing some advocacy work where I can.
I know for me, Emily really taught me unconditional love.
Yes.
And also taught me to get rid of judgment, to really be much less judgmental.
Right.
And as you said, like, just having Emily for 21 years and you with Dillan for 19 and Matthew for 28, I would go through all of the, there's so much pain and frustration and worry and fear when your child has a problem and you're trying to get them help. Years of that for you and for me. And then not knowing what to do, not knowing how to help. I would go through all of that again, plus the trauma of her death, just to have those years just to have had her in my life, go through that, because it's suffering. I mean, that's a lot of suffering. And you've done it, basically times 2, but also times 3 with the loss of your husband. So
pain, there's many painful situations, but suffering to me is just like, we're there. I'm showing you, right? Kind of just engraving the pain and digging it in even more. And, that I can choose not to endure in the suffering of it so much, and learn how to move through the pain and the grief with my growth and growing through it with God and grace.
How were you able to keep your faith through all of this? Because I think a lot of people, I think your story reminds me a little bit of Job in the Bible, who lost his family. And I mean, I just think, like, how are you able to keep your faith?
Because it's at those times that you need to rely on it, that it is the most important. And so what is your faith if you don't give it the true test, the true testament of these situations, or the deaths of your children and your husband? I wouldn't be able to say that I truly believe and have a faith if I don't live it. So, I mean, I tell people, it's easy, and the loving unconditionally, it's really easy to love people, but it's when they're not being very lovable that it's difficult. And so with these, with my boys and, several other people, that's where your testament, your truth comes out, right? Of who you are and how you love. And I encourage people to love others where they're at, right? And to help, remove the stigma and all of the judgment, because you may not get another moment. I relish in, the last Christmas I had with Matthew, and it was wonderful. And there's, several people that would say, I don't want him at my house, and they're not welcome here for this or that. And I say, okay, that's okay. But you know what? I don't have the guilt of, what more, I should have done. I know that the moments I had and the time I spent with him, both of them, I really just value.
You came at it from a standpoint of love.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so important to never stop loving that person. I tried the tough love stuff, especially when all of it first started with Emily, because people told me to do that, right? Mm-hmm. Lots of people, counselors, juvenile probation officer, lots of people, right? So, and I thought it was so hard. I can do these hard things if it means my daughter's going to be okay. I can do it. But those are some of the biggest mistakes I feel like looking back.
Oh, absolutely. And I did it too. I might even still have a video on my phone. Matthew was homeless on the streets in Las Vegas, holes in his shoes, heat, sunburned. Terrible conditions. And you think, why? But, tough love. Don't give him anything.
And the problem with the whole rock bottom idea, as you know, is that rock bottom is death now. Look at that. Right. The rate of overdoses is up 16% over the last year right now. We're at another record high. I know you've done a lot of advocacy work as well. What's most important to you? The
stigma, I think, because I was trying to think of, I need to find a starting point, but talking about it, but there's so many different angles and avenues. And I really appreciate everybody's work. So actually, last year we did, I had a pretty large gathering to recognize International Overdose Awareness Day, August 31st. But I'm now currently trying to get the state of Oklahoma to recognize that day and lower the flags.
Oh, great idea.
To remember and bring awareness and get people to talk. There's many people, they don't even know that August 31st is international. What you have to do to go through that is it's unbelievable. I was actually just checking the status of the bill before we came on today. It takes a whole lot of work, and it might be some time, but I need to start with the awareness and talking about it, and then educating at the lower levels and more health-based response to the drug problem.
Right, because it is a disease of the brain.
Right.
But you don't have to be suffering from substance use disorder to die now. You can just make one wrong choice. Two, which we need to get across to people as well. And we all know that people's brains aren't fully developed before the age of 25. And even then, it's pretty easy in certain situations to make one bad choice.
Right.
And that can lead to death because everything is laced with fentanyl. Everything.
I was just saying, from the medical standpoint, all the treatment that my kids had, not knowing a whole lot of options, but knowing now, they had to basically fail forward in order to get the next level of care, which was something I was advocating for here in Oklahoma. I went before the Drug Utilization Review Board because our state-funded health system would only provide one type of FDA drug to treat people that suffered from substance use disorder. One drug. Can you imagine? It's like if you have an infection, you can only get one antibiotic.
Right. And there are only drugs for opioid use disorder. So only for those suffering from addiction to opioids is the only thing you can get medication for.
Right.
Were you successful in changing that?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Oklahoma does offer more than the one FDA approved drug. So
that's fantastic. Good for you. Look at what you're doing in your son's names. That's wonderful. I mean, I love that. I love taking pain and finding the purpose in it. You know, I always say that, but it sounds cliche. Maybe it's a little cliche, but I mean it because it is a place to put your pain, something to do that's constructive with it, right? Rather than destroying yourself in some way,
yes.
You know, finding a way to be constructive with that pain and to help others. I think it does. It helps me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. When you do have a really hard day or a hard moment or a hard hour or hard whatever, and all these, you know, you're missing Dillan or Matthew or Tom, you know, what are your memories? Those are the kinds of things like just this morning, I'm doing yoga. All of a sudden I had a memory and started crying. Right. I mean, that can happen any day at any time. What do you do to cope or what gets you through those times?
I have that moment and I don't try to deny myself that, but I pick myself back up and just think of all the things I do have to be thankful for and remind myself that they were the true gifts to me.
I love that. That's beautiful. And gratitude. Gratitude makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me today and sharing your son's stories and the story of your husband. I wish you nothing but the best, Denise. I just hope so many great things happen in your life all the time because you deserve it. I mean, I just feel like there's got to be someone, you have some angels now looking over you, and I hope things are going well today.
Thank you. I do appreciate it. And I appreciate everything you are doing and Emily's Hope.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I did want to mention that Denise has managed to find peace and happiness and is now remarried. Thank you for listening to this episode of Grieving Out Loud. I'm Angela Kennecke. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a positive review. You can also connect with us online at emilyshope.foundation. Wishing you faith, hope, and courage.